Welcome to Cosplayland. I am Alice, but that is actually not me. Oh, there I am, dressed like Tifa, and these are my friends Larsen and Kumo. Last summer, I convinced them to do a Final Fantasy Costa del Sol photoshoot with me, and as it was all my idea, I decided to make the cosplays myself. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let's go back in time. Okay, maybe not that much.
Of course, that's the last thing I need to serve my machine. And I did it wrong. Oh, I'll live in 3 hours.
A bit more. Okay, perfect. This is where I started making the patterns for Aerith. And yes, that was the background music. And this is also all my failed attempts. You see, no matter how many years of experience I have making patterns, sometimes they just don't work. And I need to go back to the drawing board and try several times until I get it right. But as always, if you want to save yourself some time, I will be linking my patterns in the description to make it easier for you. For this cosplay, I was mostly using fabrics I had at home, like this thick cotton. And yes, I did use quite a bit of it. But let's leave the skirt for later and let's start with the top. I designed this piece as a semi-corset, so you want to use a strong material to keep everything in place. This, I think, is cotton twill, but I don't even know because it's something I had in my house. Some of the sides of my top will be finished with bias tape, so I don't need to add seam allowances to those edges. For the rest, I simply add 1 cm, which is the usual that I leave on my patterns. This top is actually quite simple to make. It only has a couple of dots at the front, and the rest are just rectangular pieces sewn together. The only trick for this part is to get those crisp lines at the bust by tying a knot at the end so they don't come undone. You can then do exactly the same for the lining, because yes, we are gonna make it look nice. Making a lining for a cosplay when you are short of time is annoying, but trust me, it is gonna look so much better if you add it. And this is a corset and you need the structure, so if you have to skip something, don't skip this part. You will notice I cut the lining a little bit shorter than the shell fabric, but I will go back to that in a second. For now, I am just going to sew the pieces wrong sides together with a long stitch, because I am actually finishing these edges later, and this is just to keep both fabrics together. Don't worry if your pieces don't match perfectly, you can always cut the excess to keep it all clean. And let me show you the back. You simply fold it inwards twice to hide the edge. But before you sew it, make sure you add a piece of interfacing to the back. I almost forgot it. And you want to add this piece of interfacing because this is where you're going to place your grommets. And if you don't reinforce this part, chances are your fabric will break. So far, this is going super smoothly, but of course, here is my first mistake. I actually forgot to test my pattern, or actually I was so short on time that I didn't test it, and when I tried it on, it was too big for me. Trust me, cutting the lining open to fix this really hurt, and it took way longer than it would have taken to just test the piece. But I was able to fix it. At this point, I only had a week left before I was going on holidays with my friends, and I really needed to have it done. So let's handmade some bias tape. That's gonna be quick, right? You may have noticed the top is a lovely dusty pink color. How am I going to get bias tape that matches? Well, of course, I am going to make my own, because we are crafty and we don't need to go looking for impossible bias tape, do we? This is actually way simpler than you think. To make bias tape, you simply have to cut strips of fabric at a 45-degree angle. And I happen to have this very useful bias tape maker to fold the edges inwards. With a bit of heat, your bias tape is done. Yes, this takes a little bit longer than just buying the bias tape, but if you do it this way, you will get a perfectly matching tape for your fabric. I warn you, it is quite addictive. And with the tape finished, I was doing great timing. I simply had to attach it to my top. The best way to attach the bias tape is to open it first and stitch it on the folded line. Once it is ready, you simply have to fold the other side inwards, making sure you folded the edges too. And simply sew it again. If you know me, you know I'm a fancy girl, and I always try to make my edges as clean as possible. A good way to do this with bias tape is trying the stitch on the ditch. This is simply trying to hit exactly the groove where your fabric meets, but you need to be very careful and make sure you are catching the other side of your bias tape on the back. At the front, doing an inward corner was a little bit tricky. I simply pinched the front to add a bit of room to the bias tape because it has to turn all the way to the back, and I just simply carried on sewing on the other side. The front wasn't perfect and I knew it, but don't worry, I'm going to be hiding it all with a giant bow later. And yes, no matter how many years of experience and how much bias tape I have put on my cosplays, I always end up missing a part and I have to just finish it by hand, which is not the end of the world. After a very good press to get rid of the extra wrinkles, the top was finished. Well, almost. I still needed to add the ruffles and I had one day left before I was flying to Spain. For the straps, I simply cut 2 rectangles and added bias tape to one of the edges. The ruffle is just this weird shaped strip of fabric gathered together. But before I gather it, I thought it would be best to finish the edges. I used a roll hem foot on my sewing machine to speed up the process. This trinket simply folds your fabric to make a very narrow hem before you stitch it. It also gives a very professional finish and it is super cheap to buy. And as it was already on, I also use it on my skirt. I can see how dangerously low on thread I am. Let's do this. But yes, if you noticed, Aerith sleeves actually have 2 ruffles, so I am going to sew 2 lines of basting stitches to the ruffles while holding them together. Once they were ready, I just had to pull from the top thread to gather the fabric until I get it the same length as I needed on my straps. I don't show it here, but I actually tried the straps before I even did the ruffles just to make sure I had the correct length. And once they were the right length, I stitched the ruffles to the straps. Hey, I'm doing well, that's actually not too bad, I just need to hide the edge on the inside. This has to work because my plane was actually leaving that day, and this was exactly the last step I needed to do.
Of course, that's the last thing I need to sew my machine, and I did it wrong. I'll leave in 3 hours. It's too long and I made this too short, so I need to retake it and just don't have time for it. And this is also very short and I don't know why my camera doesn't want to focus. Yes, perfect, perfect, perfect. Yeah. I can't do this anymore. It's gonna be sewn by hand.
So yeah, I had to take the cosplay with me and finish it by hand. But it's okay because I also did not get my flower prints on time and I had to send them to Spain in order to finish the skirt. Honestly, I do not recommend you to iron your DTF with an iron that literally electrocutes you when you touch it. Hooray for all beach houses! I was very lucky my sister was there to help because I wouldn't have been able to finish it without her. It was so difficult to remove this DTF and to just get the fabric to stay in the little table. Thank you, sis. And with the last few stitches and adding the final bows of camera, the cosplay was finally done just before the day of the photo shoot. And I was finally able to shoot with my friends.
Yeah.
These may not be my most amazing cosplays nor the most complicated, but they were so much fun. I just can't thank my friends enough to make this photo shoot possible. And if you also want to cosplay with your friends, I will leave you a link in the description for the patterns so you can make them yourselves. For me, the summer may be over, but I still have lots of projects to show you, so make sure to be back next week because I will be seeing you in the next adventure. Bye!
Allo.
está grabando, ¿vale?
Vale.
Ponlo que se quede recto. Recto. No, pero vamos a ver, coge la cámara y ponla que se quede recta.
Porque me estás tú poniendo las manos del medio.
Coge la recta, más arriba,
Así.
un poco más arriba.
Ahí.
Ahora. A ver, a la de 3.
Vale, vale.
¿Cómo se para? A mí no me ha dicho cómo se para esto.
Pues igual que